I'm guessing that she and her pup and numerous other mums and pups would have been in those sea caves and perished.
Seals in Cornwall usually give birth between August and December, but Sue thinks that might change. As our winters become stormier, pups born earlier could become more successful. This might solve one problem, but could cause another, especially as Cornwall's tourist industry grows.
Most seal pups tend to be born in remoter places. Often on the north coast here, it's on beaches that are inaccessible, which is fine. However, a pup will leave the beach at 3 weeks, and those are the animals that tend to come into conflict with humans because they'll rock up on a public beach because they're exhausted and just want to sleep. It's a public beach and people just want to have a look. If you shift the cycles of the natural world, that interaction and conflict between us and nature is going to get worse.
But whether you love it or loathe it, tourism is a major part of Cornwall's economy, and perhaps nowhere more so than the Isles of Scilly.
The main reason that people give for coming to our islands is the stunning landscape, the peacefulness, but also our wildlife. If we haven't got the wildlife returning to our islands, then people aren't going to come here to be able to see it.
But increasingly stormy weather is affecting the seabirds that so many visitors flock here to watch, not just while they're feeding out at sea, but also when they come ashore to breed. The problem is a tree from New Zealand that was brought to the Scillies over 100 years ago.
Pittosporum was brought to the islands primarily by farmers who fence or hedgerow fields to protect the flowers in the flower fields because of the wind that we have around the islands. One of the downsides to the tree is that it has these little pom-poms on. The birds really love the seeds within the pom-poms. So our land birds will eat the seeds, they then disperse all over the islands. We've now got trees on all of our uninhabited islands. Now, when you think about gulls, puffins, Manx shearwater, they like wide open spaces where they can see predators, where they feel that they can protect their chicks the best. They like rocky outcrops that they can stand on and they can kind of survey the land beneath them. When you've got Pittosporum trees that are popping up everywhere, it blocks the view. It also removes areas of breeding ground. So the ranger team will go out to our uninhabited islands and they will remove Pittosporum trees. It's a huge task because they're really fast growing. They self-seed too, so once you've got a tree on an island, it just kind of pops seeds everywhere. Their main tasks in the winter is going to our uninhabited islands and trying to keep them how they used to be, so wide open spaces that the birds like. With the severity and frequency of the winter storms, the ranger team can't get to the uninhabited islands as much as they used to be able to, because when they go there, they go on a dinghy with brush cutters, chainsaws, all of the equipment they need, and it's beach landings or rock landings for most of the time. And obviously if we've got big ground seas, big swells, they can't land on the islands.
Sadly, storms can also damage some of the very marine habitats that we really need to help suck up carbon. I went out kayaking with Fiona Crouch to find out more about her work to protect one of them.
Seagrass is amazing. It's known as a wonder plant. Not many people know about it because it's below the waves. It photosynthesises, just like our trees and our plants on land. And so it pulls in carbon dioxide and then it releases oxygen. It can store carbon like 35 times more than our rainforest. And it can consolidate sediment, so it can be good to reduce coastal erosion because it reduces the impact of waves on our shores. It's an amazing nursery ground for lots of different species, like commercial species of fish, which is really important, and other species such as seahorses and stalk jellyfish. So it's a brilliant, brilliant plant.
But the UK has lost over 90% of its seagrass meadows in the past century. Fiona's now heading up a project that aims to recover seagrass beds in 5 special areas of conservation around the country, and this includes a project to replant 4 hectares of it here in Plymouth Sound.
And it's very much in its trial stages at the moment because it's very challenging. It's not like on the land where you can just go and plant out a few seedlings and give them a bit of water and see what happens. Seagrass is a flowering plant and it actually does have seeds, but a tiny percentage of them actually will grow into little seedlings in natural state. So we can collect those from the wild, and then those being taken to the aquarium, and then they grow the seedlings from seed, and then those will be transplanted out into the bay.
But just replanting seagrass won't solve the problem on its own. Fiona's team is keen to get to the root of the other problems that are damaging seagrass in the first place.
The traditional moorings that we have, they're a big concrete block on the seabed, and then there's a chain and then the buoy, like we're bobbing around on here. And those chains that actually scours and abrades seagrass around the base of those moorings. If you go onto Google Maps, you see it in Isles of Scilly, you can see the circles around the boats where the seagrass has been scoured. There's several alternatives. The one that we're moored up to here is a sterling mooring, and it's quite a simple system, but basically there's just a number of buoys on that chain that lifts that chain off the seabed. And they have seen that in these areas the seagrass is growing back up to the base of the mooring.
But a big part of the problem is that many sailors just don't know what's beneath them.
And I came out here last May bank holiday, came to talk to some of the people anchoring, let them know that actually there's a seagrass bed below there, it's a sensitive habitat, it's protected. And a lot of them said, oh, really sorry, we didn't know it was there. And I'd like to think once people do know where there is, they'd like to take action to avoid anchoring within seagrass beds.
Another serious threat to seagrass is runoff of topsoil and slurry from farmland, which will happen more often as winter rains become more intense.
Seagrass needs light to grow. If you get a mass deluge of red, muddy water coming down into the sea, then that's going to increase the sediment, which can have a smothering effect. You know, they're quite resilient marine species, but if we just keep piling on the stress in all different areas, they're going to struggle, and we need to give them some help because they are so important.
And ironically, our efforts to fight climate change could actually create another source of stress for marine habitats. The government wants all our homes to be powered by offshore wind by 2030, and this is going to mean huge amounts of underwater construction, pipelines and cables. But these things are usually encased in concrete to protect them, and concrete production itself actually releases huge amounts of carbon. Now one local company has come up with an ingenious low-impact alternative involving this pile of Cornish china clay waste and what looks like a heap of old washing machines.
As divers, we'd seen the damage done to rocky reef habitats and limestone habitats through bottom trawling. You'll come across these trawl marks and absolute devastation in the seabed. And unfortunately, rock doesn't regrow. So we thought, well, let's come up with a way to recreate these rocky reef habitats and to provide sustainable homes for marine life. So they're made from a Portland-free concrete mix with recycled materials. It's 80% less carbon to produce our cubes. We need artificial reefs because there's a massive decline in our commercial fish stocks and marine species in a whole, worldwide. Primarily that's because of man's interaction with the ocean, and whether it's building offshore wind farms, oil and gas platforms, or trawling for shellfish, we've caused a lot of damage, and we need to act now to put something back and give the species somewhere they can grow up. They look very grey initially. Once they're deployed, after about 3 months, you'll have a very thick biofilm already adhering and covering the cubes, so a green browny colour, and that is the start of the reef build. And from that, you'll get barnacles, you'll get tube worms, you'll get kelps, we'll get seaweeds, and we'll all adhere and start growing from the cubes.
James hopes they could also be used to help restore fragile habitats around the world that are already being affected by climate change. The company's trying to propagate coral onto the cubes and also trying to grow mangrove seedlings in them, which could help to build up coastal defences in low-lying tropical countries. But as sea levels rise and storms increase, they could help Cornwall too.
Cornwall's got a very, very long coastline with lots of open areas to the sea and coastal erosion. And if we can protect the coastline from the damage and from the storms and provide marine habitat for organisms, then it's a win-win. Our current production is probably 200 to 250 different size cubes per day, but we're hoping to upscale our manufacturing on a much larger scale with batching plants and other machinery. We could be producing maybe 2,000 to 3,000 cubes a day. And we need to do that to actually have an impact. Ultimate goal for 20 years' time, I'd like to see reef cubes, or if not reef cubes, nature-inclusive design used for all offshore construction. We've got the technology, we've got the know-how, and we shouldn't be building stuff in the sea if it's not going to benefit the sea life as well.
I've been lucky enough to meet some of Cornwall's top marine experts while I've been making this film, and the message from all of them has been clear. Climate change is going to bring huge challenges, but there will be opportunities too. And in fact, with so much sea surrounding us, Cornwall could really pave the way in protecting the marine ecosystems that are going to be critical to protecting us in future. It's still not too late as long as we all get on board now and do our part to protect the sea, because it controls our climate and supports such a vast array of life. And that life includes us.
You have a question? Do I have any questions? Well, I think that kind of play. Ask the question. Good job. Well communicated. Absolutely. Yeah. So, Bill? Yeah, Bill. Okay, so I hope some of you were watching that beautiful film. Mark is with us, we featured in the film, so I'm going to ask the people online. I don't think I'm on camera, which is always a good thing not to be on. Oh, I am on camera, sorry. Look down the lens, give it some blue steel. Sorry, I don't really do blue steel these days. So I'm just going to say, so if there are any questions online, please drop them in. We've got, various Rocket members out there fielding calls from you online. And I am going to go and ask people in the room if they have questions. We still have Mark with us, who features in the film, and indeed introduced the film. So I once again do have a question, but if there are questions in the room, any questions about sort of these blocks or anything like that? Or if there are any questions online, we will come to you. Mark, come up on stage, because I have a question for you, Mark. Thank you very much. So for a start, I just want to say what an amazing film. I hope you all agree it's a really beautiful film. Beautifully shot. Thank you. It's so important. I am no scientist, as you've gathered, but the importance of this scientific communication in a sort of poetic, truthful, local way is so important. So my little question was, and I'm going to hand over to you, what could we do? We've seen some of the problems discussed in this, and I was absolutely horrified. And I think we were just quietly talking about where birds are now really struggling kittiwakes in Spain, and then up in southern France, and now northern France, which, by the way, you can see with your eyes from the coast of this fair island. What can we do about it? That's a quick question. It's probably quite a big answer. But are there things that we can do, listening in the room or online, to help issues we've just seen in the film?
Where do I start? There's, yeah, I mean, I think it's just to inspire people really, that a lot of what we know about the good news and the bad news from the sort of marine environment or any part of the environment really is based on good science. And I'm a scientist, so I'm slightly biased, but science doesn't have to be dull, doesn't have to be boring, doesn't have to be lab-based. That you know, anyone can be a scientist. There's probably loads of scientists sat out here staring down microscopes and just identifying things and tracking change. And that's really what everyone can do is just get out there and be a marine recorder in whatever way that might be, even if you're counting things, describing things. And that's all our very early scientists did really. They were explainers and they were observers of the natural world, and that hasn't changed. You know, that still has a big contribution to make. So you know, that's where people can make a difference. You don't have to be an expert. If you can count, then you can count birds. It's really not that difficult. So there are lots of ways you can get involved. So do be inspired.
Okay. I will check in a moment if there are any questions. There's a certain young gentleman in the room who seems particularly enthusiastic. I believe his name is Ben. Ben, would you like to ask a question of Mark? Thank you.
Thanks very much for the young gents. For my day. Yeah, so I've got a question. I'm not as well versed in climate change issues as I might be actually, and I did a bit of reading ahead of this today. Some papers about rockwool species that have been affected. And I was really surprised in one of the papers that I read, is actually by Nova, who spoke earlier today, that it was saying that it had data for the sea temperatures over the last 40 years, something like that. And it was saying that the last 20 years, it fluctuated a lot locally, but hadn't actually increased or decreased. But we've seen some big changes in the rockwool wildlife, and you've talked about the changes with the kittiwake. I'm just wondering what's going on there. Is it a delayed effect of the previous heating, or is that something sort of time?
Probably not completely, actually, but yeah, I think in a lot of cases, this unpredictability and the natural world kind of relies on predictability because things will evolve to fit a particular niche, and that niche will have certain characteristics, and those characteristics really have to be quite uniform and predictable. And quite often, what you'll find is, I mean, the guillemot thing I raised, the guillemot issue I raised earlier, where guillemots have had to switch their diet from sand eels to sprats. That is about unpredictability more than anything else. It's not the sand eels aren't there; it's that the sand eels are there at a different time of year. And if you're on the very scientific term, it's called phenological mismatching. So food, prey and predators are existing perhaps in the same numbers, but at different times of year. To put it into context that people can probably more easily understand, if you think about blue tits feed on caterpillars, but as the climate warms, those caterpillars are coming out earlier in the year. So when you've got a nest box full of blue tits, desperate for food, the peak in the caterpillar numbers has already come and gone. So when the blue tits need caterpillars, they're not there. So when the guillemots need sand eels, the sand eels aren't there. So I think it's that unpredictability that is the real issue, not necessarily the long-term change, but the fact that you can't predict where your next meal is coming from puts you in quite a lot of trouble. Anything else?
I think vaguely answer. I think it's a tough one. I am going to come to the room once again. Madam, are you bidding on something, or are there any questions coming in from anyone? I'm just looking to see if people do have any more questions, but I'm going to swing to have a quick look online. Sophie, any questions from the young of the audience? I don't know. Oh, there's a question. Madam, please, are you prepared to come up a bit nearer the microphone to ask the question?
Have a bit of extra.
Okay, I'll come out. We're going to kind of reach out into the audience. Please use your name and ask the question.
Hello.
Sorry.
Well, you just asked just now about is there anything you can do about the current crisis, the climate ecological crisis? And you're representing all ecologies, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
So you've got sort of, you did respond on that scheme. I just wondered if you could expand that a little bit more, because I think you've just watched that amazing film, which I know. And I just wondered if you could broaden it out a bit and say a little bit more about what we could all do. Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go back to kind of where we started and say that, you know, what we really need to do is inspire people to do more. But there is a scientific route where, you know, a lot of what we're doing and a lot of what we know that we talk about in those films is based on good science, and someone has to collect that science. But then, you know, there are lots of scientists of the future sat around here that, you know, at the moment are in primary and secondary school perhaps, and those are the kind of people that you want to inspire to be, not only become the scientists of the future, but the good communicators of the future. You know, Claire Wallerstein from Global Climate Care is an amazing communicator, you know, and she's been the driving force behind all this. So she's not a scientist, but it's inspiring more people to become more players in the world, you know, and that's how we can really make a difference. Anyone want to add to that?
If I may, I'm not really meant to ask the questions. I think you being here and asking questions, madam, is a huge part of what we can all do, and people online, people listening in the room, having coffee and baby listening to us. Taking an action is super important. And I think that action is important for the action itself, and in a slightly disconnected sense of what it reminds us to do as people who vote and as people who spend a pound in our pocket. How and where we vote, how and where we spend a pound in our pocket is hugely important. And I would say, I'm sorry to big up the Rockall project, someone like Ben who's given up his life and his family's life to running and starting this project here, which is run by local people in this area to talk about the fascinating, beautiful wildlife that we do have here. That is a major part of what we do, which is to catalyse action. It's a bit of an obvious, generic reply, but it is the truth. We need more actions from more people. And I would like to think that those actions can add up to potentially shifting the dial on this whole thing. But I would hesitate to say that we do need to talk about how we vote, how we spend our money, and those kind of things. Sorry to bring a bit of politics in there. And I'm just going to check for anyone. Oh, we have another question coming in, sir. If you'd like to say your name, sir, and then ask the question.
Okay, my name is Jonathan Kersley. Last week at the book festival in Apollo in town, Charles Clover talked about this called Rewild in the Sea, which is totally relevant to the kitty wakes and all the rest of it. So basically, it's amazing, real amazing story and brilliant book. If we can stop people trawling, it's all the trawling on the bottom of the sea, which is good. There's no harm in catching some fish, but leave them to breed and have more young. I mean, it doesn't stop fishing, but it brings back all the wildlife on the bottom of the ocean. That was the great message of this brilliant book. So it's totally tied up in a kitty website at Land's End. When I first came here, up by the bridge, they're not there anymore. They'll come back, who knows? It's kind of came Canada through all the messages in that are unbelievable. The turtle having 99% female about that.
Yeah,
amazing. So it's all tied up with data. But thank you for stimulating wonderfully too. Thank you.
thanks.
Yeah, if I can say it, so it's not meant to be, but some of those questions were starting to be answered in that wonderful film, in as much that we did see things being done with what was a waste product that is creating nurseries in places for marine wildlife to breed, to find shelter. And indeed, Mark and I were quietly discussing with the film was shown that most of us aren't going to stop eating fish. I don't eat a lot of fish, I don't eat any meat, but there we go. It is something that's known and people are taking action. It's always one of the things when you do events like this, I'll come in front of the camera occasionally, when you do events like this, not to be too depressing about things, because fishermen are aware, because it's their livelihoods. They might have a 40-year mortgage on a boat. The person that skips that boat may not fish out the life of that mortgage on the boat, but they're
Usually, excuse me to be prime genitor here, usually their son or potentially daughter that may take that boat on will fish it out. So it's within their interest to fish more sustainably. And some of those efforts that you saw in that film are answering some of the questions you just raised, and indeed by Charlton's book, which is a really great book, Rewilding the Sea. And it's important. We have a question coming in from a young person, which is absolutely fab. Please say your name and ask your question clearly. Thank you.
So if these fish first came in and found that there was food, did they go back to where they came from, or would they move on, or would they stay there? And if they do any of this, would they do them every year, or would they change depending on what they now know?
Yeah, I think it's a hard one to answer because I think again it's that predictability. Birds are very versatile, so you know we can see that we've lost kittiwakes at some of our sites for years on end, but then that's quite a kittiwake behaviour. That what they'll do is they'll just move to a different site, so they are able to kind of move within a big we call it a meta population. So you have our Cornish kittiwakes aren't our Cornish kittiwakes; they're English Channel kittiwakes. So I colour in kittiwakes, so I give them little numbered rings on their legs that I can read from a distance. And we have a kittiwake that was hatched on the Isles of Scilly in 1996. It was a breeding adult when we caught it on one of the cliffs in Cornwall, and we gave it a little colouring. And that was in 2013, and it now breeds in France. So you know that bird now is what, 27 years old. So yeah, so they are able to kind of move and react to change, and the more they need to move, they're able to do that. But the more they have to do that, then slowly it just kind of nibbles away at the edges, and then eventually there's nowhere left for them to move to, and they'll kind of disappear. And you throw lots of other things into it, like predation risks as well, for things like peregrine falcons. And what you sometimes find is that if birds are having to work harder to find food, then they're away from their nests more often. So you find that they're more prone to predation by birds of prey, whether it's ravens taking eggs or peregrine falcons eating their chicks. So they're more prone to that if they have to work harder for the food. So sometimes the food will be there, but it's how hard they have to work for it, and how they kind of budget that, how they manage that.
Cool, Mark, thank you so much for being here. It's really appreciated. Thank you for taking your part in that amazing film. You're on Twitter, you are
At ringing on the store, Mark.
okay. So I mean, and indeed he's chimed here today. See, that's why I'm here. So thank you so much, everyone. Round of applause, please, for Mark Grant. Thank you very much, Gil.
Thank you very much.
And I'll hand back you to the tech team on the laptops. Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah, it's really good. But I mean, when you see
Right, thank you, Mark and Falmouth. That was fantastic. Really, really brilliant and inspiring stuff. A great film and a passionate question and answer session. We've got another really exciting speech coming from Plymouth very soon, in exactly 10 minutes. And a couple of minutes before that, I'm going to give you an update on our Bioblitz. I've got live scores coming in, and so I will log back on here 3 or 4 minutes before 2 o'clock. That's right, isn't it? I'm abroad and struggling with the time difference, but 2 or 3 minutes before 2 o'clock, I'll see you on here, give you an update, and then I'll hand over to Ari and the Plymouth Hub, ready to introduce our fantastic next speaker, Professor John Spicer. So see you soon. Hello again, and welcome back to the Rockpool Project's Bioblitz. It's a Blue Recovery Changing Tides Day. It's the biggest event the Rockpool Project have ever held. And 6 years ago, the Rockpool Project formed. Two people sat on a kayak and came up with the idea of linking citizen science and education. And incredibly, thanks to a wonderful, passionate team of volunteers, wildlife enthusiasts, and young and old people, we've come together, and this landmark event for us is about halfway through now. And I thought I'd share with you how many species have been found so far. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and hopefully I'll be able to show you our live stream on iNaturalist to show you the number of species found to date, or actually to the minute. So let me do that now. And you can all see how close we are to our 300 species target. There we go. So far we've had 122 observations. We've found 78 species so far between us, and they are coastal species, land and marine. We're used to collecting marine species identification, so it's a bit different for us today, but really exciting. And it's just brilliant from my point of view, sat here in Dubai, coordinating the online stream, to see people rambling about, having fun, making connections in Plymouth, but equally at the same time in Falmouth. It's the first time we've really come together as a project like this, live and online. And to have found 78 species between us already is wonderful. Now, you might think, oh, we're a long way off of our 300 species target. However, I have been told we've got numerous records that have been collected and photographed, and they just haven't been uploaded yet. So those people, I'm sure, will be dashing to a computer or zooming in on their phone on the app, ready to upload those records, because there is a 3:45 p.m. deadline. That's when we're aiming to get any record taken today uploaded onto the brilliant iNaturalist app, ready to count towards our target of 300 species. I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about iNaturalist. We've only started using it as a project over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and it's a real game changer. It's a free app. It comes from California in the USA, and it's now used worldwide, and it's wonderful. It allows anybody to download the app on their phone, take a photograph of a living thing, and it will use AI, artificial intelligence, to help identify what that species is. It uses data such as your location, such as the time, recent records nearby. And then on the adult version of the app, I'm a school teacher, so I've been using Seek, which is the children's version. But on the adult version of the app that people are using today, it also allows other people to see your records in real time and agree or disagree with your identification. So that's a really exciting change for all of us. I think it's going to make, sorry, just making sure I'm not cutting people off in Plymouth. I think it's going to make a big difference to the future of the Rockpool Project. We've got really exciting plans going forward. And I can see that Plymouth are almost ready. So I think what I'm going to do is wrap this up. I'm going to stop screen sharing now. Looks to me like Ari's ready to introduce our next speaker. So I'm going to go quiet. I'm going to hand over to Ari, who I think is going to introduce Professor John Spicer. I'm really looking forward to hearing from him. And here he comes.
Right, I'll try and sort of talk around everyone. If I spin around, it doesn't usually fall over. Forgive me. Anyone ever seen the Observer's book of the sea and seashore? Yeah, it's famous stuff. This is the copy that my father brought me back. I think he found it in a report on the hospital. He found it and he thought, John likes titles, he might quite like this. And he brought it back, and I hadn't started school at the time. And I just remember reading, they that go down to the sea in ships and do the business of the great waters, they see the works of the Lord and his wonders in the deep. that was amazed me that someone would quote Judeo-Christian scriptures as part of a biology book. And then when you get into it, the beautiful little drawings, and all of a sudden, the title that I'd sat in, did sit in that title for quite a long time. My mum put me there, not because she didn't love me. It made sense because you could look at the pictures and I could see what those things were. That was on the Isle of Cumbria, where Milport Marine Station is. And it was just a wonderful place. And Mum, Dad, Glasgow people, we went on holiday every year, 2 weeks. And one of the things that they did was that they realised that John would keep super quiet and was really good if you put him in a rock pool, which Mum could see from the window. And so I would sit in this rock. I mean, you wouldn't be allowed to do it now, would you? You turn around and then all of a sudden the kids go on and no one can do it at all. But in the 1960s, you could do things like that and get away with it. And I didn't drown. What I did do though was I just sat and watched. I was just totally fascinated. I don't even know where the idea came from, that I should be like this in such a difference. It's a tiny little book making such a difference because it gave me a little bit of the knowledge that I needed. But only a little bit, only a tiny little bit, because as I sat in that tide pool, there were things that I saw which I remember thinking, how does that work? And I remember vividly sitting and seeing this tiny little shrimp. I thought the shrimp, it turns out to be an arthropod crustacean, the most interesting things on Earth. And it was swimming in the water, and then all of a sudden it changed the size of the pool. And it crawled out. Now, I don't know about you, but you don't expect shrimps to just crawl out of the water. It doesn't normally happen. And I remember crawling out and thinking, how do you do that? If you're a shrimp and your legs are not terribly good at walking, how do you walk out of the water? I also remember seeing just all these other shrimp, proper shrimp, swimming around, and they were terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And I remember picking one up and putting it out and watching its little legs and little legs folded under, and it had no ability to stand. And I thought, goodness, so how does this shrimp differ from the other one? Now, yeah, not knowing that one's a proper shrimp or prawn and the other's an arthropod crustacean, for those who know these things. But all these questions, I remember seeing for the first time a small sea urchin salmon Canis miliaris, a great name, where all of a sudden it opens the top of what I thought was its head. It's not, it's its bum, bottom, sorry. And it's and it defecates. And then, if you take it out of water, it pulsates. But why would you do that? First of all, why would you defecate over yourself? I know we all do it when we're very young, but I mean, as soon as you realise that it's not a good idea, things change. Why would you do that? What sort of design is that? Is that a design flaw? And also, when I take it out of water, why is it it's the bit that was moving? It looked as if someone had got the inside of it, like a whip. So yeah, the observers at CNC Shore taught me a lot of things, but being in the tide pool left me with more questions than things that I knew. And that just fascinated me. I didn't know that you could make a job out of this stuff. You know, being brought up in Glasgow, if you got a job at all, you worked in the shipyards. The scum worked in the shipyards or was unemployed, and that was it. And it was my teachers who said, actually, the curiosity you've got, you know that you can study that. I was amazed that you could do things like that. I've got a lot to thank my teachers for. Those simple questions that I asked as a kid, and a very, very young kid, there's something about asking a question and then trying to get the answer to it that's really important. It's something that at the University of Plymouth we've tried to embed in the degrees. And when we succeed, it's brilliant. Asking the right question, being able to chase it. And my whole life, I've been allowed the privilege of chasing some questions that I had when I was 4 or 5. One of them, how on earth does a little shrimp, this was done for me by a colleague of mine. I'll pass it down, it's absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. This is, I don't think, of Orchidea gamarellis. Say after me, Orchestra camera. Let's try again now. That wasn't really very successful. Orchestra camera. It's excellent stuff. And this was the shrimp that I saw crawling out the tide pool. And when it went up, it not only walked, but then it jumped 50 times its own height. So I want us all to try that. How do you do that? After I finished university, I was really fortunate. My supervisor employed me as a research assistant. And he said to me, "You could do a PhD with this." I said, "No, I want to find out how these little shrimps come onto land." And he just looked at me. I don't know if you ever had this look when someone looks at you as if, "Oh, you poor soul." You know, no, I'm a full-time job. You know, you won't be able to do a PhD in something totally different. So I just said, "Well, I fancy doing that." And that's what I did. During the day, I worked on his project, which I'll tell you about. But at nights, during weekends, I wanted to find out how these little beasts lived on land. That little beast you see that's being passed around, one of the things that I noticed was that if you pick them up really, really carefully, that underneath their body, there was some water. And if you dried the water, you know, you took a little bit of a towel and you dried it being a nice human being, it wasn't long before the water reappeared. Where did the water come from? Now, if you leave it down, it hops around and it comes to a small puddle or a pool, doesn't matter what, it sticks its bottom down, gets some water, and it's all there. But I was drying it and it was becoming wet again. So where's the water coming from? Exosomatic water, water outside its body, where's it coming from? So I looked really carefully and I noticed that below its eyes, there are two little holes, just below the eyes. And those two little holes is where it urinates. And there's sculpturing down its face. And it's amazing because the sculpturing runs down the face onto some little plates that are to the side, and it's channeled into that groove that is underneath the animal. So it's urinating into this groove. And the females keep eggs there. The males and females, they have their respiratory organs, the stuff which they use to exchange gases there. So this creature is making its own little seed. Now, how good's enough for it making the seed? Here's a question for you. So one of the things that you give it some fresh water. Oh, that sounds sore. Give it some fresh water, tested it. Afterwards, 1/3 strength seawater. We gave it some full strength seawater, tested it afterwards, and it was almost 1/3 strength seawater. No matter what we did, this animal could generate a little 1/3 strength seawater in its outside water by urinating into it and also exchanging stuff across the gills. And that has allowed that animal not just to come onto land, but actually to go quite deep into land. We're talking about miles and miles. In fact, there are at least 2,000 terrestrial species. All of those terrestrial species are there because they've managed not to have an aqualung, but an exo-aqua bit to take the sea with them. And that's been their success. What's also interesting is if you go to a sandy beach, all of you have gone to sandy beach and seen the Talitris saltator, the sandhoppers, you never find them above the strand line. They're always on the strand line. And so I thought, if I'm right, and that water is the key to going onto land, maybe the sandhoppers don't have that. And so pick up a sandhopper and look underneath it, and that water's just not there. It just doesn't have the ability to hold the water and control it. I'm just like, let's say you go onto land, you take the sea with you wherever you go. And you don't just take it with you, but you make it as well. Quite a neat thing to do, to take a question which you asked as a kid and find the answer to it. And you could say it's a bit self-indulgent, but we'll come back to that. The second thing is, during the day, I was working, learning how to be a scientist. It's all right having the wonder and curiosity of a child, but as soon as you start to ask questions, you need proper tools. And one of the tools is, how do you ask a question? How do you know what you're seeing? How do you discover something unless you know it's there? How do you do an experiment, an abstraction of reality, which gives you a model of how the world works, and then say something about the real world from that. Those are really big philosophical things. And of course, as an undergraduate, even a postgraduate, I had no idea, really. But I was doing them. And during my day job was working on a creature like this. This is a blended prawn. This one's about 200 years old. This is from Nepal, and it doesn't live in tide pools. You don't get tide pools in Nepal, although maybe you will someday. Blended prawns, big news in terms of quite tasty. This is a freshwater one. The saltwater one, Palaemon serratus, is what we call a common prawn. And it was the subject for fishery for many, many years. We know it's Palaemon serratus, and it's worthwhile knowing that because there's another species which is slightly smaller called Palaemon elegans, which lives not subtidally, but actually intertidally. We've got these two prawn species which live in different places. And so the project that my supervisor, Alan Taylor, wants me to look at, how are they different? They look almost identical, very difficult to tell apart. How are they different such that one can live at the top of the shore and the other one can't? And so I was doing various biochemical and physiological measurements. Biochemical means you switch things up and you measure chemicals. Physiological means that you look at breathing rates and sort of heart rate, all these sorts of things. And I was trying to look for the difference between the two species, and I found some really neat stuff. Because the one that was subtidal, the one that always lower down the shore, which was serratus, picture like this, wasn't as good at putting up low oxygen or salinity. I thought, yes, that's it. Now, what's really interesting is that just because it's a good story doesn't make it true. So, yeah, the animals are very different in how they respond to oxygen. And the one that was at the top of the shore, much better at putting up low oxygen. Got my story. I'm sitting by this tide pool in the middle of the night, as one does. And we're watching the oxygen in the tide pool go down. And all of a sudden, this shrimp comes out of the water. It came up to the surface of the water, and then it went into the shallows, and it lay on its side. And as it lay on its side, and a little bit of shrimp biology, for those of you that don't know this, shame. Inside here, underneath, there's a flap. This is a flap that comes up, and there's gills under here. Right? Same across here. Bit of a flap, gills under here. The animal pulls in water. It pulls only things to protect its mouth. In this case, it's lying on its side, with this part semi-submerged, a little bit outside, and it's got a thing called a scaphognatite or a scaphognatite. What a brilliant word! And what it does with that scaphognatite is it hits the surface like someone with a whip, just smashing the surface and aerating the water, so that the water that the animal's actually taking in is aerated. So it's lying at the side, on its side, and it's got what we call a partial immersion response. Now, what was interesting was that Palaemon elegans does that and does it beautifully. It does it to order. We even did it for Secret Life Rock Pool, you know, a TV program, and it worked first time. Well, that's great, I think, I'm just glad it did. But it doesn't work with Palaemon serratus. Serratus doesn't show the same response. So I'd spent a long time showing the physiological and behavioural, physiological and biochemical differences, and it made a good story. But the bottom line was that the prawns hadn't read my papers. They did exactly what they do. And when it's low oxygen, one of them comes up to the surface, lies on the side, and beats the water to aerate it. The other one doesn't. That's a fundamental difference. And if I hadn't actually been beside that tide pool, the original papers would still be there and they'd be part of folklore. Why are these animals different? Because of the biochemistry and physiology. We had to, but to tie it in with surviving conditions in the tide pool when it got tough, you needed that behaviour. That taught me quite a few different things. It taught me that nature really doesn't give up her secrets easily. And you really do have to be careful and dig. And you just can't take a story because it's a good story. So again, a bit self-indulgent. I didn't get paid quite well for it in those days. the National Environmental Research Council actually paid their students, graduate students, quite well in those days. But a bit self-indulgent. I was fascinated by how things worked. And that's what made me do this. I had no real regard for saving the world, at least not with biology. Saving the world was something we did with politics. And certainly it took me about a few years when I was a first lecturer in Sheffield to be involved in local politics to make sure that biodiversity issues were actually on the agenda. I didn't actually think, that my biology would actually affect very much, which for any of you who are working in policy, now you probably think that's hugely naive. But I'm older than you. So it was a different world, completely different world. However, what I did find was that the skills that I've gained from Alan Taylor and some of the best scientists in the world, I've been really fortunate. I've fallen into working with the best people. I didn't really know. I ended up working with that person. Oh, that's amazing. And I think, oh, what's that about? I didn't know. I know now that if you're going to be good, you work with the best people in the field that you're in. You don't just go to anyone or any teaching, you go to the best people. And they taught me how to understand how things work inside and to take a bigger picture. And then, middle of the 1990s, I was doing quite a lot of stuff with carbon dioxide and oxygen together. I remember sending a scientific paper away for review, and it was a sea urchin house and coke with high CO2, high carbon dioxide, and low oxygen. And it came back from the editor and it just said, "This is fascinating. The response of this creature to oxygen is great. But why, oh, why would you bother with carbon dioxide? It's just not an issue." And I've still got that. It's framed. I don't know what the frame is, but I've got it framed anyway. But that was subsequently quite important because I've understood how an animal worked, how it maintained its internal composition when carbon dioxide changed, when oxygen changed. And at that time, the middle 1990s, no one seemed to care. Then we came in to the 2000s, and there started to be rumbles of, goodness, do you know that there's a real problem with CO2 dissolving and chemically reacting with seawater? What's that going to do to sea animals? Temperatures are increasing at the same time. What's that going to be doing to sea animals? And I found all of a sudden people were coming to my door, knocking on my door, saying, "You know how to look at and to understand how animals work. Will you come and work with us? We'll give you money." Now, when as a scientist, if someone's going to give you money, I mean, just burst into tears at that anymore. But lots of money came because of the expertise that I gained looking at different drawing, looking at little shrimps, looking at stuff that no one actually really cared about. But the skills to understand how they worked all of a sudden became essential, apparently, around about 2005. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is actually not my achievement, but one of the achievements of two of my students. Probably, yeah, if I'm going to talk about any research that I'm really proud of, it's theirs. Ruth and Polly were two students who were undergraduates. They were looking for a project to do. They had just been in a lecture which I had given, and they found out that high CO2, we didn't know it was an issue or not, ocean acidification. Everyone was saying, what are things going to dissolve? But we didn't actually know. No one had actually done any experiments. And so they'd heard me say this in one lecture, and then they'd gone to a friend and colleague, Simon Rundle's lecture, and they'd been doing something totally different. They were doing induced defenses. The fact that if you're a snail, it's not a snail, it's a snail shell, for those who are disappointed. If you're a snail with a snail shell, if there's a predator there, you can detect that and you can make your shell a bit thicker. It's very cool. Now, the cool part was not the fact that I told them about ocean acidification or that Simon told them all about this induced defense. The cool thing was that both of them put the two things together. And they said, well, hold on. So what happens if ocean acidification does make the shell thinner, but at the same time, predators in the water, they make it thicker. So what happens if you look at the effects of a predator and ocean acidification? Now, this was before any stuff that was actually done and the Royal Society published a very influential report on it, and it was long before that. The two of them came up with it, and I went to my friend Steve Widdicombe, who's at Plymouth Marine Laboratory, and said, if that's something he's going to run with this sounds exciting. And what they found was that these shells, as soon as you put them under CO2 conditions, they lost a little bit. They didn't lose any of their outside. They didn't. If you, hello, if you then put them under high CO2 conditions and you give them predator response, so they should thicken it, they don't thicken it. So really subtle, really subtle. When the government came down to Plymouth saying, what do you know of ocean acidification? It was Pauline Ruth's work that PML and the MBA and the university said, that's the thing that we've got just at this minute. Now, to change that for that, and certainly all three organisations have been very, very involved and were and are at the forefront of that. But it was the pair of those students that made such a big difference. Why was that? Because they realised that the wonder of the shore is great, but actually understanding what's going on itself is a fairly powerful motivator. Understanding what's going on when you have a crisis is more than just a good thing. It's totally essential. One of the beautiful things that Pauline Ruth's work and approach was that they were always at the forefront of their fields. And that was because they wanted to actually understand rather than just do an experiment. That's what made it really powerful. And that's what motivates me. It's what motivated me as a kid in the rock pool. I didn't have the ability to do the experiments, but it was the rock pool that taught me and has continued to teach me how to do science and how to teach other people to do science. And I would say to any of you who are involved in science, doing your own science is brilliant, it's really good, it's a nice heady thing. Teaching other people to do science and for them to do science better than you is super cool. Absolutely super cool. Much, much better. Much better for you and actually much better. Teaching people how to do science and watching them fly because they want to understand and do understand is one of the most heady things in the world. Now, I don't want you to go away just thinking, oh, you know, the wonders of the rock pool, no, he's totally blooming science. Any of you know John Steinbeck? Not personally, he's dead. Anyone know John Steinbeck? Maybe read Cannery Row? Having said everything that I have about understanding, the understanding itself is not worth very much unless you value the thing you're trying to understand. It's not just understanding, you have to value it. And I love this description. This is the sort of thing that I would love to have written because it's about someone that has spent time collecting and watching a tiny pool. But the English language in a way that I haven't got to describe what they see. Doc, who was a marine biologist, was collecting marine animals in the Great Tide Pool on the tip of the peninsula, west coast of the States. It's a fabulous place. When the tide is in, it's a wave-churned basin, creamy with foam, whipped by the combers that roll in from the whistling buoy in the reef. But when the tide goes out, the little water world becomes quiet and lovely. The sea is very clear, and the bottom becomes fantastic, with hurrying, fighting, feeding, drinking animals. Crabs rush from prawn to prawn on the waving algae. Starfish squat over mussels and limpets, attach their millions of little suckers, and then slowly lift with incredible power until the prey is broken from the rock. And then the starfish stomach comes out and envelops its food, orange and speckled with fluted nudibranchs, that's sea slugs, slide gracefully over the rocks, their skirts waving like the dresses of Spanish dancers. The anemones expand like small and brilliant flowers, inviting any tired and perplexed animal to lie for a moment in their arms and then some small crab, or little tidal johnny, exceptionally breathing in for levitation. The petals whipping, the stinging cells shoot out tiny narcotic needles into the prey, and it grows weak, perhaps sleepy, while the searing caustic digestive acids melt its body down. The smell of life and richness, of death, and of digestion, of decay and birth, burden the air. And salt spray blows in from the barrier where the ocean waits for its rising tide. Strength to prevent it to come back in, to be brave the tide go again. And on the reef, the whistling boy bellows like a sad and patient bull. Understanding and wonder go together. Thanks very much. Absolutely incredible. I'm talking about it on this part.
We are incredibly grateful to John for giving us the talk today. Are there any questions for John? Does anybody have any questions for John?
You don't have to have it.
You don't have to have that.
John, next question.
Yeah.
First of all, a kind of simple question, but do you think the ocean really is under credible ocean?
So the question is, do I think the ocean's is under incredible threat? I think it's difficult to believe that the enterprise of 7.9 billion people would not have an effect, even without the data. It depends which data that you have to go on. Certainly, in terms of fisheries data, we know that things are being fished down. And although there's models of that have been published, which I think is quite frightening, I mean, they're well beyond what we've actually seen at the moment. So I would say that there is enough information to say that things are changing. But the idea, and it's with biodiversity generally, it's not just the ocean, we've got 7.9 billion people doing far more and consuming far more energy than ever before. Each individual person is consuming hundreds of times more energy. It's difficult to believe that there can be an effect. So,
yeah, thank you. I've raised that question from a perspective that I consider myself an ocean activist. So I think the most credible threat to the ocean right now is over-extraction. As you know, several other things. I think it's what we're taking out and what we're putting in. I'll be putting in pollution and chemicals. But I think just the incessant industrial extraction of many species now ultimately will possibly create a major collapse of ecosystems globally. I don't know. Is that possible? Do you think that is possible?
I'd like to say it's not.
No, I'm just saying that there's something like your background. Do you think it's possible that there could be a major marine ecosystem collapse at some point? I'm conscious of the fact that we are industrially fishing out probably the biggest biomass on the planet, iron krill. But if you look at the extraction process, then it's 24/7, hundreds and hundreds of industrial type ships constantly tapping these fishes, which is ultimately is the base of the food web. So we're basically excavating the foundations of our house.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that there's a lot of modelling being done, and that modelling is very, very impressive.
Yeah.
2050 and 2100. We are seeing changes in the life history of fish, such that the size of fish, and the size at which they go into reproduction.
Yeah.
But I suppose the thing that gets me is having realised that the whole thing is so complex that it doesn't take a lot to throw off balance in some ways. And you just think of the current that runs by here. We have a current which keeps us warm and changes everything. If that current moves just a little bit, everything changes. But you can always, if you're a denier, you can always find things that will go against that. So, for example, well, I mean, we're now doing aquaculture where we're extracting more by aquaculture than we are from fisheries. Therefore, everything's going to be okay. You know, and the problem is, it's quite, you have a system where everything works together. And if you start to take it apart, you must have done it yourself. You want to fix something. You think you're going to fix the washing machine, all of a sudden, that's it, you're buying a new washing machine. You can destroy the whole thing. But you screwed up well enough to make sure that you can't do your washing anymore. And that's what ecosystem services are. 66% of what is done by nature for us, according to the 2005 biodiversity report, is destroyed and degraded. Now, again, I put that in the book, and I remember someone from a well-known newspaper contacting me and saying, oh, I'm really fascinated, I fancy doing a story in this, but he said it's only 2/3. What happens if I say it's 90%? I said, well, we don't know, but 2/3 is the best that we've got. He said, well, it doesn't sound very much. So let me just say to you, 2/3 of what keeps you and your children and everyone else alive is destroyed and degraded. Doesn't sound that much to me. It's okay, I know a guy from the University, I'll talk to him. And that was it. So I mean, I think no matter what the evidence is, this idea of imagination and actually valuing things, unless we start valuing emotion, we will lose it one way or another. And I don't know which is going to be the main cause. I mean, we seem to be just so good at screwing everything up that we touch. It's like persistent feature humanity. Sorry, that's.
Well, that's very no.
This is the problem. If you ask these kind of questions, the response will be, oh, that's a bit negative, you know, but actually, you know, I've given talks and I have recently, and I'm saying to people, the ocean is under threat. And I can't believe I'm even thinking or saying it in such a short space of time. That, as you know, 50 years, most of the fish have been caught, but it seems like 10% of the fish came out of that. So, on the positive note, I believe the entirely the message is valuing it. So, as part of valuing it is like what we're saying here today, just go out and look at it and record it and wonder in it. And by the way, just to finish off, the book you started off with, I still have the my original copy I bought in Plymouth in 1997 when I was 11. I still got it. I still have it, and I treasure it. And I've still got a dust jacket on it. So I know. So I bought that book in Boots and Plymouth, and I still look at it on a regular basis. So you know, it's a wonderful thing.
Written by a geologist.
So we're going to have to move on. Do we have any other questions for John? Yeah.
What do you think is for the 5 years? What has been your favorite thing in the plan?
Oh goodness. Absolutely. That's absolutely possible. I mean, you don't have to. Sorry, totally not me. I think the thing that started me more was going to a table where we were routinely collecting over 40 hours in quite a remote location and finding a Volvo in it. Just saying. That was pretty spectacular. We had to go under the car to go back.
Alan.
John, have you had a chance to see any of the latest David Attenborough series?
No, I fall asleep when I watch television. It's not what's TV.
It's one of the scientific showing how the species are adapting. It shows these seals, no, not seals, what's the little ones? Come on, what called?
Little seals?
No, little. What they?
Octopus?
No, they did. Antarctic. Oh.
Penguin.
They actually shut out. They get my sharks. They mob them and drive them away. Yeah. Otherwise, they feed off them. And that's something skill that we've learned to do. And he's showing that slant. I mean, what I'm trying to suggest is, have you come across yourself examples of where species have adapted to respond in that imaginative, creative way to the challenges that they're facing?
Yes, but it's not going to be a panacea for our problems.
I'm not suggesting that, but I just want
we need to stop doing what we're doing. I mean, there are creatures, and to be honest with you, I was really I was really doubtful when one of my students wanted to redo an experiment which was done by the Marine Biology Association, or at least a woman who was doing her masters at the Marine Biology Association back in 1914. The shores of Wembley, there's a little tiny flatworm, and she was looking at its ability to regenerate. Flatworms are great. You can cut their head into five heads, and they're just totally good at regenerating. And she wanted to know what happens if you change the salinity of the water, and they're very good at regenerating. And what my student said was, well, if I go back and redo that experiment, because I know that the sort of precipitation has changed in Wembley since 1925, I predict the animal does better up in salinities. She went and tested that. And it turns out within 100 years, this animal has changed the way it does its physiology to be able to cope with lower salinities. That's an example was called an evolutionary rescue. There are very, very few examples, and I certainly wouldn't put my trust in them. Really wouldn't. I mean, it's great, it's lovely that those things happen, but it's not something to put our trust in. Mostly, evolution can be really quickly. It can go really quickly. But the creatures we study are all common creatures that can live in the lab. Which is the nearest approximation that every creature that exists is a rare species. In fact, be kept in a lab. So we can do things in the lab, but it's not going to tell you about biodiversity generally. Sorry, that's a long answer.
No, thanks for that. It's interesting to have a perspective on the programme, because it does have that standard.
I was genuinely surprised that we showed evolutionary rescue, and it was the first one in the marine environment, first example of that. Some people wouldn't publish it because they didn't think it was true. Which is a bit strange, isn't it? Because I thought you looked at data, but apparently not.
We have time for we have time for one more question, if we have one. If not, then please, no. If not, please give a huge round of applause. As a final notice, in 15 minutes time, we will, weather permitting, go out to
Okay, well done, Plymouth team, for organising such an inspiring talk from Professor John Spicer. What an inspirational character. Someone who's really known throughout Plymouth and the marine scientific world. I know he's inspired so many people in the Rockpool Project volunteer team, and I'm sure that's the same in Falmouth as well as Plymouth. I can see on the live iNaturalist stream, in fact, I'm going to take another look and just reload, see how we're doing. I can see that we are 176 observations. Yes, Ben, I can see you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just let you know that you're very loud and clear down here, so we're all listening, so carry on.
Great. Always great to know at least one person's listening. I wasn't sure for most of the day, but that's great. I think what I'm going to do now, Ben and Falmouth, is wrap up from me, because Plymouth are having a few technical issues. They're not going to be able to broadcast live from there anymore. So it seems the best thing to do is to go back to individual hubs. However, what I'll do is make sure that the Zoom and the YouTube is still running, so that between the two hubs later on, Falmouth can broadcast to Plymouth and share last results. But a quick update as of now, 103 species. In fact, I'm going to share my screen with everybody. There we go. We can see that we've got 176 observations, 103 species, and they're only the ones that have been uploaded. I know there are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds more, being collected by our passionate participants and wonderful volunteers today. So the deadline, I believe, is 3:45 p.m. Make sure you upload them onto iNaturalist. As long as they're up on there by then, they count, and our target is 300. I'm confident, even though time is short, we can make it. Really, that just leaves me to say a huge thank you and well done. There we go, I am back to everybody. Those who don't know me, I'm one of the co-founders of the Rock Project. Ben is a very old university friends of mine. No, I always say that in the wrong way. We've been friends for a long time. He's not that old. And 6 or so years ago, we came up with the idea of trying to link education and citizen science. And to have so many people join in an event like today is just remarkable. Not only have we got world famous published speakers in Plymouth and Falmouth, but we've got children, we've got families, we've got grandmas and granddads. And by whatever means, we've got people joining in from Orkney today. I'm actually doing this from Dubai. We've got people all over the country. The Rockpool project has grown into a remarkable project. And everyone listening to this is a part of that, and everyone in Plymouth and Falmouth today. So I won't waffle on. I know there are people, Ali, who are very good at that, much better than me at doing that in both hubs. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the afternoon. It's been a real treat for me to be able to be part of this from here. Good luck with the rest of the Bioblitz. Please let me know how it goes, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
We can't hear you yet, Ben.
Oh, now it's working. Can you hear me now? You can't hear me.
I can hear you.
I know, it's very concrete. Look at that guy. That's my highlight of the day. I don't know if Alan's there. Are you there, Alan? Can you speak?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
You're echoing all over the place to the whole of the Princess Pavilion.
Oh, good. About time.
Okay, forget it. I just, as long as you can hear me, I just want to say a big thank you for joining in from Dubai and tying it all together. It's been brilliant to have you on board. Hopefully, you've managed to enjoy yourself from over there.
Absolutely, yes.
So just give us a thumbs up or something. All right, cheers, mate. Enjoy it. Catch up soon. Cool. So you guys are going to be showing a bit of your film. We were going to say about 3 o'clock. Where are we on now? So it's about 10 minutes time. Is that all right? Okay. So Adam and Dan are going to be previewing their amazing film, which is called Rockpool, which I was privileged to be a part of earlier on this year. And there's going to be a bit of it already. And I can tell you, it's well, possibly the best rock-falling film I've ever seen. And I'm not just saying that. It really does capture the essence of the habitat beautifully. And they're going to be talking a bit about it and presenting some of the footage from it in 10 minutes time. So do carry around for that.